I don't have a worship associate.
You don't?
I
Jen
don't.
is-
She's missing. She was here and she switched. Oh, wait.
No. Good morning. My name is Jen Kanzi-Eaton, and I'll be your worship associate for today. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. Come walk with us this hour. The Stream of Life by Rabindranath. Oh gosh, I am very sorry. Tagore. The same stream of life that runs through my veins night and day runs through the world and dances in the rhythmic measures. It is the same life that shoots in joy through the dust of the earth in numberless blades of grass and breaks into tumultuous waves of leaves and flowers. It is the same life that rocks in the ocean cradle of birth and death in ebb and flow. I feel my limbs are made glorious by the touch of this world of life. And my pride is from the life throb of ages, dancing in my blood this moment.
I just want to sit next to you when you're speaking. It gets weird.
As I light our chalice this morning, I invite us all to remember all those who have been affected by this coronavirus, those who have died, the tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands perhaps at this point who have died, and all those who are infected or are in different stages of their illness. Let us say the words to our chalice lighting together. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, to speak the truth in love, and to help one another.
Okay, my reading is up. Prayer of Sorrow, UN Environmental Sabbath Program. We have forgotten who we are. We have alienated ourselves from the unfolding of the cosmos. We have become estranged from the movement of the earth. We have turned our backs on the cycles of life. We have sought only our own security. We have exploited simply for our own ends. We have distorted our knowledge. We have abused our power. Now the land is barren. The waters are poisoned and the air is polluted. Now the forests are dying and the creatures are disappearing. And humans are despairing. We ask forgiveness. We ask for the gift of remembering. We ask for the strength to change. Our next reading comes from Black Elk, the Sacred Hoop. Then I was standing on the highest mountain of them all, and round beneath me was the whole hoop of the world. And while I stood there, I saw more than I can tell, and I understood more than I saw. For I was seeing in the sacred manner the shape of all things, the spirit. And the shapes as they must move life together like one being. And I saw that the sacred hoop of my people was one of many hoops that make one circle, wide as daylight and starlight. And in the center grew one mighty flowering tree to shelter all the children of one mother and one father, and I saw that it was holy.
In the branches of the forest, in the petals of the marigold, on the shoulder of the mountain, in the vastness of the sea, you will find a brooding sadness over all the ancient watershed. You will see it written plainly on the wind and in the sun. There's a light upon the mountain, there's a sickness beneath its land, and we'll ask the age-old question, can we purge us of this sin? Can we save a little nest from In the thunder, your commandments sound a warning through the wilderness. Let the forest be untainted, let the streams be undefiled. When the waters of the river, as they flow down to the ocean, be as sweet as the old days when the mountains stood alone.
In the book of Genesis, God tells Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. Chief Noah South, also known as Chief Noah Seattle, writes, this we know. The earth does not belong to us, we belong to the earth. This we know. All things are connected like the blood that unites one family. All things are connected. Whatever befalls the earth befalls the sons and daughters of the earth. We did not weave the web of life. We are merely a strand in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. So here we have polarized opposite understandings of how human beings should see themselves in relationship to the earth. From this biblical creation myth, the first human beings are told to subdue the earth and have dominion over it and every living thing. And from Chief Noah Self, we are told that the earth does not belong to us, but that we belong to the earth. We hear that human beings are only one strand in this vast web of life, and that whatever happens to one part of that web affects all. Unfortunately, the Western world that we live in has been mostly influenced by the Judeo-Christian tradition. The biblical imperative to subdue the earth and everything and everyone on this planet has controlled and limited our thinking for millennia. Human beings, we've been told, are special, better, made in God's image, God's chosen people, and we're in charge of the earth and everything on it. Well, it seems to me we've made a fine mess of that, haven't we? As we chop down rainforests, the lungs of the earth, and fill the oceans with plastic and other pollutants that destroy marine life, as the pollutants we pump into the air destroy species and wreak havoc on human health, when will we realize that this cannot continue and that we will soon destroy the Earth's ecosystem and ourselves in the process? Far out in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small, unregarded yellow sun. Orbiting this at a distance roughly 98 million miles is an utterly insignificant little blue-green planet whose ape-like descendant life forms are so amazingly primitive that they still think digital watches are a pretty neat idea. That paragraph marks the beginning of Douglas Adams' book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And we know that he's talking about us when he says insignificant and primitive. That's a rather humbling way to look at ourselves, isn't it? Yet I think a good dose of humility is what we need right now. What would it be like for us to know how small and insignificant we are in this vast universe? Can you remember the first time you saw a picture of the Earth from space? Now, for some of us, that's perhaps been a constant image in your lives. But many of us here today were born before we launched ourselves into space. Those first photos and images were thrilling and breathtaking and a little humbling to me. When I see those images of the Earth in all of its beauty and wholeness, it changes my perspective and my thinking about this little piece of the Earth that I inhabit. In The Color Purple, Alice Walker writes, "Should say, but one day when I was sitting quiet and feeling like a motherless child, which I was, it come to me, that feeling of being part of everything, not separate at all. And I knew that if I cut a tree, my arm would bleed. And I laughed and I cried and I run all around the house. I knew just what it was." How many of us can say that we've ever had this feeling of being part of everything? How many of us can say, if I cut a tree, my arm would bleed? But we can return to that more indigenous place of deep connection with the earth and all of its elements and beings. We can discover again what is our place in the family of things. Earth-based religious teachings, as well as those of mystics from every religious tradition, have been telling us for millennia that we are all connected. Here in the Western world, we may just be beginning to understand and to grasp what this could really mean. So, one of my favorite movies is a film that when I looked it up yesterday, I realized it's now 30 years old, and it's called Mind Walk. It was made from the writings of Fritjof Capra, who wrote The Tao of Physics and Turning Point. The film chronicles a day-long encounter between a poet, played by John Hurd, a subatomic physicist, played by Liv Ullmann, and an American politician, played by Sam Waterston. I was living in Northampton when that movie came out, and I went alone to this little theater to see the film. I was so blown away by it that I went back 3 more times that very same week, taking different friends with me each time. And Paul, if you could bring up the image of Mont Saint-Michel. The film takes place, most of the film takes place at Mont Saint-Michel, a small island off the coast of Normandy, France, that is dominated by an enormous abbey that was built between the 9th and 12th centuries. You can get to the island by a road during low tide, but it's only accessible by boat otherwise because the road floods over. The sheep that graze there have evolved to be able to digest the salt marsh grasses. The 3 main characters meet and spend the day talking about the meaning of life, each from their own perspective of poet, politician, and scientist. So, okay, thanks. I was able to avoid taking physics in high school. I had a horrible time in chemistry, so I completely avoided physics. So this was my first encounter with current ideas about subatomic physics 30 years ago. Well, when I was in high school, I remember learning about atoms as solid structures with photons, neutrons in the center, and electrons swirling around that core. And Sonia, the physicist in the movie, says, we tend to think of subatomic particles as some kind of small billiard balls or small grains of sand. But for physicists, a particle has no independent existence. A particle is essentially a set of relations that reach outward to connect with other things. The essential nature of matter lies not in objects, but in interconnections. She says that what we think of as solid objects are not solid at the subatomic level. And I hope I'm explaining this correctly in layman's terms. It seems like everything at that level is mostly made up of empty space, as this web of interconnections and interrelationship swirls around. How can this be, she is asked? After all, we are separate beings, separate entities, aren't we? There is, after all, a clear distinction between me and you, and me and this quilted chalice behind me, or the pulpit, or that piano over there. The scientific truth is at the subatomic level, there is a continual exchange of matter and energy between my hand and the wood on this pulpit, between the pulpit and the air. And if you were all sitting here in the chapel in front of me this morning, there would be an exchange of matter between you and me. Ultimately, Sonia says, whether we like it or not, we're all part of one inseparable web of relationships. One inseparable web of relationships. In our seventh Unitarian Universalist principle, we covenant and affirm to promote respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. As it turns out, this interdependent web of existence is not only a nice religious principle. At the subatomic level, the web of relationships, the web of interconnectedness is the basis of all that exists. What would it take for us to recognize that no being, especially no human being, can ever exist and thrive apart from its environment? What would it take to viscerally know, to feel in our bones our own interwoven connection to the earth and its creatures, water and air, rock and forest? I believe that the major problems we face are our own arrogance and greed. We have come to see ourselves as so powerful that we still think we can subdue, harness, and control the earth and other people, and the forces of nature as well. We want it all. We think we deserve it. And we think we should have it. And this faulty thinking is reinforced by a cosmic theology that puts human beings at the center and puts the entire universe at our disposal. A theology iterated in that first chapter of Genesis. But even this is changing. Western religious traditions, including Christian evangelicals, are beginning to re-look at and reinterpret Genesis and find there a responsibility and a call to care for the earth and her creatures. Our challenge as Unitarian Universalists, our challenge as human beings, is to continue to speak a language and a theology of interdependence. Our challenge is to move away from our self-centeredness and to humbly recognize how really insignificant we are and our place in the family of things. Our survival and the survival of our fragile planet depend on it. We have forgotten who we are, but we can remember again. Amen, and blessed be. I want to invite everyone that Paul has put the words to "Earth was given as a garden" on the screen, and Sandy will sing and play it, but I invite each of us in our own locations, it's a tune you're familiar with, to sing along.
Earth was given as a garden,
I don't know if you are familiar with the wonderful writer, nature writer and spiritual writer. Her name is Terry Tempest Williams, and she is from the Mormon tradition. And in her book, Leap, she writes, "We have been everything before. If I were to look into the eyes of creation, insect, fish, spider, serpent, snail, hawk, fox, giraffe, and turtle, even bird by bird, what would I see? What do they know? Would we dare to take the evidence of our kinship seriously? Would we dare, I ask you today, take our seventh principle seriously? Would we dare understand ourselves as so deeply connected to the earth and all of her creatures that we would never be able to harm each other and this earth again? Let us go forth with that thought in our hearts and in our spirits today.